Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Day two. Well, I get to be the host of this morning's panel. A little bit more of a talk story session, maybe a little bit more like a late night show host or something like that. Maybe that's the way I'll play this thing out. But this panel is about creating a resilient energy economy for our state. Obviously, as the director of the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm very fortunate to be joined by three other very distinguished panelists here this evening. The first is Aki Marceau. And I'll just give a little bit of brief background for everybody, and then I'm going to turn it over to them, and they're going to give a short little presentation about each one of their areas, and then a couple of questions and answers, and and hopefully some dialogue after this. So Aki works for the Energy Accelerator's community partners portfolio companies to co-design demonstration projects across Hawaii and the Asia-Pacific region. Prior to joining the Energy Accelerator, she served as a land use and sustainability manager for the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation. And you guys all know what that one place is, right? And a transportation planner for Parsons Bickerhoff, where she developed integrated solutions for sustainable development through stakeholder coordination, geospatial investigation, and National Environmental Policy Act. Excuse me. As well as NEPA documentation. Aki earned a Master's of City and Regional Planning from Cornell University and a Bachelor of Arts in Growth and Structure of Cities from Haverford College. Wow, Haverford. What a resume, Aki. Our next panelist is Kush Patel. Kush is a senior management consultant at E3, where he leads the company's work on the East Coast. His recent projects include New York's Reforming Energy Vision initiative on retail rate design, net energy metering, cost-benefit analysis, distributed energy resources, business models, as well as general wholesale market analysis. At E3, Kush is also the primary lead on work with technology companies, project developers, utilities, asset owners, investors, financiers, and other entities on a variety of strategic asset valuation, market analysis, financial issues in both wholesale and retail markets. That's quite a resume, Kush. Kush earned his Master's of Engineering Management degree from Dartmouth College, along with an MA in Accountancy from George Washington University. He also holds a BE in Materials Science and a BA in Economics from Dartmouth. And our last panelist, Cheryl Roberto. Cheryl is a partner with 21st Century Utilities, where she focuses on utility transformation and regulation. Cheryl has broad experience in utility operations, energy regulation, and public policy. Prior to joining TFC, she led the Environmental Defense Fund Clean Energy Program, a national initiative dedicated to modernizing the United States energy infrastructure through regulatory reform. Also a former commissioner of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, she served as co-chair of the 2012 National Electricity Forum. And prior to serving as a commissioner, Cheryl was director of the City of Columbus, Ohio Department of Public Utilities, where she led a team of over 1,300 employees to serve more than 1.1 million people in Central Ohio. Cheryl is also an experienced environmental litigator who has served as an Ohio Assistant Attorney General and an Assistant General Counsel for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She holds a bachelor's in political science from Kent State and a JD from Ohio State University. Buckeyes? Is it Buckeyes? Buckeyes. Well, this is our panel, everybody. I'm going to turn this over to Aki. And Aki, you have a little bit of a presentation for us, right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for that really wonderful introduction. And I feel so humbled and honored to be on a panel with such distinguished energy experts. I'm definitely more on the land use and transportation side, so I can speak to where the rubber meets the road. But first, I'm going to start off by casting the gaze onto the audience, and I want you to think about this question. What do you think it takes to transform a place, with one of the goals being a resilient energy economy? And you don't have to answer the question right now. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. Well, maybe some wrong answers. But while you think about that and ruminate on it, I'm going to show you this video.
Yeah.
It takes people.
Terviva develops a new crop. This tree produces seeds from which we extract oil to produce biodiesel. I work for Pono Home. We help people lower their utility bills. We've been focusing on low-income and elderly families.
We've had someone come into our home and we have devices installed that helps us to monitor the use of electricity.
Cutting 25% off those bills, people were really appreciative. It was awesome to hear that and feel like we were making a difference. Start small and then people start to catch on and then you get a lot of adopters.
Hawaii is 10 years into a 40-year energy transition. In 2045, our lives will be powered by 100% clean energy.
At Energy Accelerator, we fund startups and entrepreneurs to solve a very lofty but achievable goal of solving the world's energy problems starting in Hawaii. And it was really great to see this conference kicked off by Gil Peñalosa, and then yesterday's panel on the water energy nexus and ag nexus, because that really echoes our approach to energy, which is a systems approach that Colton actually mentioned this morning. So we fund startups in the transportation, agriculture, fintech, cybersecurity, and water, as well as grid and renewable and distributed energy resources space. Two of the things that we look for when we're funding projects and partnering with startups and entrepreneurs is that they have a transformative quality in whatever field that they're working with, and also that they're scalable. So we don't want to just fund demonstration projects that are one-offs and kind of one-off pilot projects without a path forward, but when we work with our community partners, which is you guys, and our startups, we really want to see once the technology is de-risked using our funding that there's a path forward to scale within whatever entity that they're working with, and then eventually nationally and globally.
Well, thank you, Aki. I love the video, actually. Well, our next panelist, Kush, from E3. Or yourself, I think you have a little bit of something to say and something to show us.
Yeah, I want to appreciate the conference organizers for inviting me to beautiful Maui. It's been a great conference so far. We had a great dinner last night with the panel, and it's been kind of really nice to get to know everybody, kind of informally as well as more formally through here. I kind of want to talk about retail rate pricing, utility rate structures. I don't want to bore everybody with rate design principles this early in the morning, but I think I have a unique perspective because I've been both a developer working at a solar company as well as working with various utilities. And I kind of understand the issues on both sides of it in terms of how to balance pricing. And looking at that video, there's all this innovation that's happening, but you really need the pricing to be right and the markets to be there in order to actually bring some of these technologies to market and to enable them. But you also have to make sure that all the customers or non-participants are also being kind of unharmed. I kind of think about Gil's video yesterday, the 880, the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old, making sure the grid works for them as well as the fit 30-year-old. So there's kind of a broad array of technologies out there that I've worked with, mostly in the context of New York. Thinking about how to value DERs, how to value the grid. It's pretty complex, as everybody here knows, and a lot of the cost-benefit tools are kind of still evolving to accurately quantify all the benefits that DERs provide. And then, how do you take those benefits and translate them into some sort of compensation scheme that's both fair and equitable, but also, you can actually finance certain DERs, which have their own challenges. And then how do you value the grid and all the things that it provides? And then how do you make sure that, all customers benefit, over time? And then lastly, then, how do you pay for it all, which is always a big concern, both in terms of cost allocation and financing. So, I've thought about basically how to, make those trade-offs, and I think, a lot of folks have also thought about it, and, unfortunately, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I think there's a lot of things you can do, in terms of kind of more dynamic rates, more, innovative pricing to allow customer choice that really, enable some of these technologies. I'm sure Key and Cheryl can talk a lot more about it than I can, because they work with a lot of these folks day in and day out. But, it seems like it's a 360 type of problem where you have to have the pricing in the markets and the technologies and the financing and kind of all coming together to, to basically create this new clean energy ecosystem, which I truly believe will be happening, over the next 20 to 30 years.
Oh, thank you, Kush. Well, Kush brought up dinner. If you guys were at our dinner last night, you probably would have been a lot more interesting conversation with regards to what can happen with the state and actually the world in general around all of the things that are happening with clean energy. But our next panelist, Cheryl, who I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times before, glad to have you here. Can you give us a little bit of a background on some of the things that you would like to talk about?
Sure, thank you. And thank you to the conference organizers and my fellow panelists for including me. I love to have a platform to talk about this because it's so exciting where we are at this stage. And I think what we're talking about is truly market innovation. And what does it take to stimulate that market innovation? So I'm going to sound a little old-fashioned and suggest that at the heart of market innovation should and can be our electric utilities. I will tell you right now that I firmly believe that our electric utilities have been a public service, a public good that have been the engine of economic development for a century by providing abundant and cost-effective power, energy to all of us. I believe that that role will continue into the future and needs to continue into the future. What I see happening, though, is that the way that is achieved will be a little bit different. I don't think we're going to see that our public utilities are going to be the sole provider of the energy services, but what we'll see is that they become a platform for integrating all of the energy services that are out there and a market innovator. So I'd like to just suggest a couple ideas for how that can occur with the time that I have available. And I have notes in front of me because I can go on a bit, so I'm going to try to be pretty direct. The market stimulation role for an electric utility isn't something that is a natural fit for the way utilities have operated. As a former utility executive, as a former regulator, I will tell you that innovation takes chances, and that's not what, as either an executive or a regulator, I really wanted to do. You are not rewarded for taking chances. I can tell you that the worst days as a utility executive involved having to explain to either my mayor or TV cameras an explanation for something that went wrong. And regulators really don't get kudos for doing a job well done. They're only going to get chewed out when something goes wrong. So what I would like to suggest is, how do we engage and enable an environment where we can take the types of chances that we need to take to really stimulate that market environment? And I will identify for you that I think that a change in the way we think about capital is very important, and finding a safe way to innovate is very important. And a couple ideas for doing that on capital changes. I know there have been discussions in Hawaii about what is the appropriate ownership model for a utility. There's a study underway now whether it should be an investor-owned utility, a muni, or a co-op. I'll suggest to you that there might be a fourth model that is well worth looking at, and that would be ownership by a small consortium of investors who have long-term patient capital, folks who are looking for returns over decades, who will commit themselves to a benefits corporation structure. So you get the heart and the soul of a muni, but you get the private capital drawn in. That's a model that could align utility operations going into the future. The other piece of that capital is that customers really need access to, or I'll call it frictionless access to capital, to make the investments on their side of the meter. What if it were as easy to plug into your wall and pay your energy bill to get these energy services? What I'm suggesting is that the role of this electric utility going forward is actually creating a marketplace for all of these third-party vendors to match up with customers who are interested in their products and services and help them find those vendors, and once they do, provide them the capital to make those investments, let them make the payment back on their utility bill in a customized tariff so that they pay, not their neighbors, and if they want to move from their homes or if they're renters, that split incentive problem is gone because it's now a meter charge, a tariff charge. These aren't rocket science or really new ideas. Munis and co-ops are doing this across the country now for energy services. And I think there are a couple of market innovations that could really put our electric utilities in the sweet spot to drive innovation. Just a couple of other ways to minimize risk. I'll just highlight them because I don't want to take any more time than I think I have already, which is we have to make it safe to experiment. And I think there's some firm ideas about how those pilots can happen in productive ways. And I think that data sharing is critical for both the product and service development and for matching customers with products and services they're interested in. All of that being said, I think that these types of engagements where sharing ideas, bringing in ideas from other jurisdictions, New York and California are certainly leaders, but I would put Hawaii out there. And by taking these conversations to the next level, building on the collaboration that already occurs in this community, I think that what you will find is that Hawaii will be a place for leading this new energy economy, finding the way that matches so that costs go down, customers get granular choices that they're interested in, utilities have higher uses of their assets, greater optimization of their assets, and it's a system that can actually engage and drive the economy as it has for the last century.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. So we get to get to the fun part of our conversation, or our discussion. And so, I've been coming to the Maui Energy Conference now for the past 3 years. And to see the level of discussion kind of evolve, the first year that I came here, we were all talking about the 100% goal. Last year, we were kind of talking about there was this small little issue that was going around last year around this time. And here we are now. We're talking about the future. A lot of the discussions that happened yesterday, Gil's presentation around what an 880 society or city looks like, and we are talking about the future. And so this panel, I look at Aki as like someone who's a planner, Kush, who's been around and knows kind of the financing and the economics around it, and Cheryl, yourself, having been a policymaker and a regulator, it's a great dynamic of conversations that we can have around what is it going to look like? Like 25 years from now, what is Hawaii's clean economy going to look like? Because it's a vision, it's a postcard from the future. And so I'm going to start with Aki, just because you're right next to me. And you had such a really good video right now. But what 25 years now, fast forward 25 years from now, what do you think this is going to look like between businesses in the community, the utility, customers, ratepayers? What is that vision?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can answer that question with much accuracy, but I guess maybe no one can.
Okay, wait. But here's the thing. It's 25 years from now.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell, right? So let's be as bold as we can
Is this
around
being
25 years.
But yeah, I think it's going to be much more of a marketplace than we see right now, a multi-directional marketplace. So we're going to have residential and commercial entities kind of trading electricity, and then I think utilities will still be very much engaged. And the physical grid is an asset that can't be ignored as well. So I think that's still going to be very much a presence. But I think I'm actually more interested in how we're going to get there. And what Cheryl said was really interesting because, so we have, in addition to working with startups themselves, we have a global advisory board, which has gradually become a bunch of utilities that have shown great interest in the Energy Accelerator. And Hawaiian Electric Industries was our first global partner in that capacity. But over the last 4 years, we've partnered with First Philippines Holdings, which has 3% interest in the largest utility in the Philippines, and they've kind of made a public statement not to invest in any more coal. And also Vector in New Zealand, TEPCO in Tokyo, and most recently Enel Green Power, which is an Italian company. And what we've seen, we've seen like very distinct trends, not only within our pipeline, but also with the utilities. And we find that these utilities are opening up VC offices, or they're creating a VC branch. They're opening up offices in the Silicon Valley to really physically track startups and where the technology and innovation is happening and what direction it's moving in. And they're following deregulated markets because the biggest fear is that any utility will get Ubered at some point. And then they're also trying to find ways to institute cultural change within the utility itself, which I find really interesting for what the future of energy is going to look like. And so to give you a specific example, which I find really interesting, one of our partners is they actually have an exchange program. So they'll invest in companies, and then they'll send one of their staff to work for that startup for 3 to 6 months to see what that feels like and what the culture is. And I think that's one really unique and interesting way to actually integrate cultural change within the utility. So my focus is not so much what the end goal is, but how we're going to get to that end goal.
Cheryl, since, Aki brought up your name and around this source. So, yes, we definitely have the journey on how we're going to get there. But for somebody that's been in this space in many different levels, as it evolves, because it's obvious that this landscape, energy itself, is evolving. 25 years from now, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I can guarantee that what I say will be wrong because that's the nature of prediction. But I would say that if you project out trends, it won't be an incremental change. What I'm envisioning is, here's an example. We put smart meters in place in Ohio. And to make sure that they made sense, we had a study about 24 months afterwards to see what kind of benefits we got. And what we found is that the system was automatically healing itself based on the information that it was getting from the smart meters. So from that point forward, I've been paying more and more attention to the fact that what I see happening is that decision-making is happening at the edges of the grid, automatically by machines outside of human control. And what I'm imagining will happen in 25 years is instead of central planning that as utility operators we've all been used to, what we're really going to be doing is sort of riding the wave of decisions that are made automatically at the edges of the grid based on blockchain-enabled transactive platforms and distributed automation and devices that are optimizing voltage, all on their own with signals going back and forth. And we'll see almost an organic kind of system is what I'm imagining. Over the weekend, I read a book by actually, I think she's a professor at the University of Hawaii, Shanna Travana, and it's called Surfing the Tsunami, and that's what I'm imagining it will be like to be a utility operator going forward. It's not about controlling the wave, it's actually riding that wave based on this new smart data-driven technology at the grid edge.
So, Kush, you have a background in economics. This data-driven world, this data-driven future around energy. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in New York, on kind of the platform economics and thinking about this from the economic side. And, I think it kind of comes down to different types of customers and their interaction with the grid, whether it be technology or behavioral changes. I think there'll be different classes, right? You'll have kind of customers that look a lot like today's customers that are just don't want to really do too much and are just happy going home and turning on the lights and using their everyday devices. Then you'll have, customers that are more integrated, want to do more things with the grid, interactive, and you'll have kind of the full interaction that's, all these enabled things. I mean, I kind of look at it as almost like Google Maps, right? There's different levels of it. The first level is just whatever most people use. The second level maybe if you want to, get a little fancy and pin some things. And then the third level is, Uber or these other kind of platform services that really use that to build a business. And, those all are kind of the same platform, but you can kind of interact with it and use it in different ways. And I think the grid will be like that. And then getting the pricing right. Is it kind of a set of tariffs and access charges versus compensation and pricing? I think that's all going to be worked out, over many proceedings and many years. But I think those are the types of questions and types of trends that are happening. Absent the technology, just kind of the customer side and the economic side of things.
So I want to explore this a little bit more with regards to it appears based upon how this conversation is moving around is that there's an empowerment issue that seems to be happening for the consumer and for business. I think the traditional utility model and I think that you need a utility, you need a functioning utility, you need a grid. I think that's a given, that's a fact. But the landscape is changing, right? I think in many ways, the whole idea that you turn on a switch and that light is going to turn on, that paradigm is almost changing a little bit. That's beyond just like a privilege. It's almost an expectation. It's all people feel that has to happen. But there is this movement. There is this technology movement that's happening. There is this empowerment of the consumer that's kind of driving a lot of this disruptive future that's moving forward. How do you see the relationship between the consumer and the producers of energy changing over the next 5, 10, 25 years? Any thoughts, Aki?
Well, I think what's interesting is there's just so much more data available in like a much more democratized form, and that's really changing how consumers are seeing their energy usage and their energy loads. I recently participated in a pilot with one of our companies called Bidgely, and they are looking at opportunities for behavioral demand response. And it was really interesting because you can essentially see on your phone how much energy you're using, when, and at what time. And then the utility via Bidgely sent out a goal of saving a certain amount of energy over a 3-hour period of time from 6 to 9 p.m., which is kind of peak hours. And it gamified how you actually live your life, which was really interesting. And I think there's going to be much more of that. And I think it's going to kind of, that idea of the expectation that the lights are going to turn on, people are going to feel much more empowered to kind of control their own behavior. And there's also going to be opportunities for utilities or other entities to, via price signals or whatnot, to control how people function as well.
Anybody want to jump into that?
Yeah, I can jump in on the economic side from like a real world example. My dad owns a hotel, and I was tired of him, hearing him complain about the energy prices for so long. So we actually got his load data and just kind of did the analysis to figure out, which I did the analysis for free, of course, that he was just using all this power during the day. He could shift some things around, like do laundry later, change some light bulbs, and just really reduce the energy footprint and his costs by a dramatic amount. He still complains about other things, but at least on the energy side, it's kind of minimized that a little bit. So I think that's, there's all this innovation, but also at the end of the day, this is a real opportunity for a lot of folks to save money and to run their businesses or homes kind of more efficiently and more cost effectively.
Yeah, I come back to, I'm an engaged energy stakeholder. I don't read my energy bill. And I think that going forward, there will be customers who are excited about games on their phone or who will engage an energy advisor. But what I'm anticipating is going to happen is that we'll get to the place that we're comfortable sharing anonymized data about customer usage, about what's happening on the system, the utility system. Right now, if you look at Southern Cal Edison's red-green maps, I don't know what they call them, but in essence, they make public where on their circuits it would be helpful to have some type of distributed energy resource and where it might be a challenge. If you combine that with maybe a Google map about the number of rooftops, or maybe an auditor's map about the age of the housing stock, all of a sudden third-party entrepreneurs will come up with products and services that are really useful to people and businesses, and they'll be able to target the people who will find them most valuable. So it won't be, it'll be more of a push or a pull, I'm not sure which way you would call it, but I think it'll really be about smart innovators on the edge of the grid making use of the data that's available on the system about customers, and then finding those customers to help them get value out of all this information.
Yeah, so, talking about technology, I am holding a piece of paper, and I'm trying to go back between a piece of paper and an iPad here, and I'm looking at this one question, and I'm gonna move a little bit and kind of back and forth between some of the questions that I'm moderating, so I get to ask the question, guys. But there's an interesting question here, and we're talking about with data. But the question is there's got to be a leader in this whole process as we move forward. Is it government? Is it the public? Is it completely democratized? Who comes up with that plan? I mean, who is going to lead, and who is going to make those types of decisions going forward as we continue to push forward, down this road towards renewable energy? This is a very heady question, and I just saw this, and it just kind of really jumped out at me. And leave it up to any one of you who wants to jump into this thing, because as somebody who's involved from a policy perspective, yeah, I'd like to know who's responsible for leading this master plan going forward. Cheryl?
I will jump in. And it's not going to be a perfect response. I'll have a couple observations. First, I think that it's important for government to set the tone, because that reflects what the public good is, what the public will is, as best as we can understand it to be. I think that the Commission has an incredibly challenging and important role in implementing that vision. But then I think it's up to the utilities and the stakeholders to really get around the idea that this is hard, it's innovative, it takes taking some chances, some risk. It means being a little forgiving, using some pilots to try these things, but having defined ideas about how long do you let a pilot go, what do you do with that information, rigorously sharing that information, pushing it back out, sharing it across jurisdictions. I think it takes government to set the goal, Commission to implement what the regulation is, but it would be counterproductive for the Commission to micromanage the utilities. It's really got to be the utilities in combination with their stakeholders finding pathways that people are comfortable with in advancing that common vision.
So I'm sorry, Kush, were you going to?
I was just going to mention, one thing I think is kind of interesting to think about or important is having kind of a holistic vision. Even in my own company, we have different practice areas, and folks that work on rates and DRs now have to think about wholesale markets because those are becoming more intertwined, and vice versa, and financing plays into it. And that's just my personal experience in my own company, let alone what's happening in the real world of all the resources and everything kind of conflating, where things happen in DR that happen that affect the long-term system planning that affects everything else. So it's hard to kind of stay siloed going forward, kind of to bring it together in some sort of kind of holistic way where all these things, or maybe 3 or 8-legged stool or whatever it is, kind of support that longer-term vision.
So, like in many ways, the plan, as the plan is kind of developing right now, it's kind of an interesting thing. You have businesses, startup businesses that are coming out with new technologies, with different ideas of looking at energy. In many ways, and I'm going to take it from somebody that's kind of looking at this from a broader view. It's almost like taking a bottle with a cork with some carbonated, substances and just shaking it. And you're in many ways, the thing is just going to pop out, and who knows what's going to pop out. Here we are in Hawaii right now. It's almost 8 years, 9 years since we really started the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative in earnest, when at that time we were in the high 90s when it came to fossil fuels for our generation, for our electricity. And here we are, fast forward, within 10 years, very aggressive. We're at a quarter. Let's call it 25% right now, statewide. A lot of that stuff happened because that explosion, that disruptive explosion, and a lot of things happened organically. And now we're focused on making sure that as this environment and as this economy moves forward, how do you temper then, like the utility and the businesses that want to come in and change this environment or bring in new ideas? And then how does that work with rate design now going forward? And this is like a question that really kind of, I from a policymaker perspective, it's how do you control this? Because it can be disruptive, and the whole idea is that as we continue to move forward in our renewable energy transformation, is we don't want people left behind. So businesses, Aki, I'm sorry, you're just close to me, so I'm gonna pick on you all morning. Right, the businesses are coming around. Basically, I have the next best thing. I'm gonna revolutionize the energy industry going forward. How do you?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to your earlier question about data, we see kind of companies coming in and applying to our program that are able to, right now data is very proprietary, and there's the utility that owns data, there's the solar developers that own data, but now we have companies that can come in and read meters without even, the use of an electrician to, have a meter reader. And so I think data access is being more democratized, and that's going to happen regardless of who has control over the data. And so just to kind of echo Cheryl's point, it's really the role of government and policymakers to kind of set the tone and frame it, but that requires a lot of education and research and just kind of following the very, very quick pace of the startups and what VCs are seeing. And it just requires a lot of research and just, doing customer discovery and going to meet with companies and talk to VCs and whatnot to see what the cutting and bleeding edge is. And that's actually something that Energy Accelerator offers to our global partners, is insight into that, because every year we have 300 plus companies apply to our program, and so we kind of get to see a cross-section in time as to what is more or less trending at that time. But kind of taking the transportation angle, I think it was Washington, D.C., I don't remember what city it was, but Uber was collecting all of this data about like origins and destinations and how people were traveling around, and the urban planners in that city really wanted access to that data because it's something that they didn't have and they were really interested in. And so that was a situation in which the private sector actually had a lot of information that the public sector needed, and it required a lot of maybe sometimes very contentious discussions about how they can access that data. And I think we're seeing that very issue pop up in all different verticals, from transportation to energy, et cetera.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I started with a defense of the centrality and importance of the electric utility, and I absolutely believe that. But I also want to make it clear that utilities are not set up to be innovative. What I'm proposing is that the innovation occurs at the edge of the grid with third-party vendors who get access and have help from the utility by the utility providing the information under the rubrics approved by the regulators, so that privacy is protected and cybersecurity is protected, but so that innovation can occur. Utilities are just not set up to operate at the speed of the market. And I think we're setting them up to fail if we believe they're going to provide innovative market services at the edge of the grid. What we should look to our utilities to do is be that engine of change, that facilitator of change, by creating a market space of trusted utility vendors that can be matched with customers who are interested in those services, empowered with the data that's available to the utilities because of their operations and their relationship with the customers.
Yeah, I kind of want to bridge both of those things, mostly because I'm in the middle right here. And, I kind of like to think about it as, technology agnostic rates. So having, retail rate design that's based on, cost and value, where, you can have any innovator come and that's fine. And they'll provide the value. You don't have to worry about, cost shifts or any kind of subsidies or things like that. In a truly neutral rate design, it won't matter. And then to Cheryl's point on innovation, then you have kind of technology-specific programs that you're trying to test the theory or a thesis or trying to test technology to see if it can actually add value and be a resource to the grid. And I think that's maybe the way you can kind of bridge both of those things while not knowing what the future is, but then you don't really have to worry about it. If you do have these kind of programs and rates in place, then you can let the market kind of flourish. But I'm an optimist, so that's kind of how I look at it.
And making that market flourish. I mean, I'm sorry, you're going to say something, Cheryl?
Well, I was going to say, and one of those safety features with those new rates is something I'm a fan of. I call it shadow billing. There are companies out there that can generate bills, and customers can see, this is what my bill is right now. Here's what my bill would look like under this new paradigm. Again, in California is moving to mandatory time of use rates. Before they go there, customers are going to get a good look at what that means to them so that they have actionable data, not just information, but something that they can make a decision about that changes their behavior or their way they use their energy. And I think it's critical that as all of this move forward, we look for those pieces of information that can be shared so that we can incrementally not make boneheaded mistakes that really either hurt people or put people off of the transition, the transformation that's happening.
And it kind of reminds me of a very famous line of a very, well, not famous line, a movie that I really liked. If anybody ever saw Armageddon, Steve Buscemi's character about innovation is like, they're sitting in a rocket, and this rocket is like, we're sitting on 5,000 pounds of rocket fuel, about to get 1 million pounds of thrust that was, developed by the lowest bidder, right? And so the whole idea around innovation, right? Innovation is not inexpensive, right? Innovation is going to happen, and there's a cost to innovation. And we're supposed to be innovative in our state because we have made this goal. And rates are important, businesses are important, the utility is important. Is there a paradigm shift, or is there, using the data, is there a way to communicate that to the ratepayer that, all of these things that are happening right now is worth it in the long run? How do you get past that desire for immediate gratification and saying, you know what, if not for us, for our kids or for our kids' kids, I mean, not to take it to a philosophical, always bring in the kids. That works every single time, by the way, just bring in the kids. But, innovation, I mean, here we are talking clean energy economy. It's going to be different. I think we all know that. How do you make that conversation?
Yeah, let me start with pushing back a little bit on the premise that it's always going to be more expensive at the front end.
Okay.
I have looked at the potential studies for energy efficiency in Hawaii, and Hawaii does a great job, but there's also always room for more market-priced energy efficiency. There's a market failure because customers don't know, who do you call to get energy efficiency? Can you trust them? Do you get the results? Can you pay for it with the upfront cost? The type of vehicle I'm talking about, the role for the utility to actually be that marketplace provider, to say, oh, hey, you've got a bit of a bill here. Let me hook you up with this provider who can get you a bill that looks like this. Make the investment, put it on your utility bill, and seamlessly now their bill goes down, and over time it will continue to be low, even as they pay back that investment in the energy efficiency. Energy efficiency providers have long had challenges with split incentives. What happens with the landlord and the tenant? Who gets the benefit? Setting up a marketplace sponsored by the utility with capital from the utility to make those investments on the customer side of the meter, not interfering with the competition, not participating in that market, just providing the access to capital, is going to bring a lot of energy efficiency to any jurisdiction, including Hawaii, which gives you the chance to bend that curve down on usage to lower bills a bit as you're making these investments that you need to optimize and modernize your grid.
It's amazing as I'm looking at the timer how quickly 45 minutes can go, and how I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of this journey going forward, what it's going to look like 25 years from now, around creating this resilient, clean energy economy going forward. And so I'm just going to conclude, and I want to thank my panelists here for wonderful conversation, and I'm sure this is a relationship and a friendship that I think we've established very well yesterday evening over much good adult beverages. That this is something that's very important. So I'm going to leave everybody with this. I think Arthur C. Clarke said it, that predicting the future is a hazardous and frustrating occupation, because undoubtedly whatever is discussed here or whatever is said, if it sounds extremely reasonable, it's probably not really true on what the future is going to bring. But if what you think about and what you imagine is completely beyond the realm of possibility, I mean, only then will you be able to really take a glimpse of what the future is going to look like. So with that, I want to thank our panel. I want to thank the audience. You guys have been wonderful. Appreciate everything, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.